All right. Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me all right? I hope. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes here. People are starting to filter in, I see, and we do have just a couple of minutes before 10:30, so we'll give people just a little chance to get on, and then we'll get started. I hope everybody's having a good morning so far. Another beautiful day. I just wanted to warn you, if you hear any strange noises in the background during presentation, they are testing, unfortunately, the fire alarm system in our building right now. So you may hear some unpleasant background noise occasionally. I apologize for that. I'm hoping that they're going to be finished with it now, but we'll see. Okay, it is now 10:30, so I'm just going to go ahead and get started. I'm Susan Griffith, and I'm the Florida Friendly Landscaping Coordinator here at UF IFAS Manatee County Extension. And I'm here to talk with you about one of my favorite subjects today, snakes. We're going to talk about the snakes of Southwest Florida, particularly because those are the ones we're going to encounter as we're going about our daily activities. That's what we're mainly going to be focusing on today. But we will talk about the other guys just briefly. Are located outside of this area. Okay. Well, presentation is not, hang on one second, sorry. My presentation is not doing anything. Oh no, it's not moving at all. Okay, I am having serious technical difficulties here. I may need to stop sharing here and figure out what's going on. Let me see. Bear with me for just a moment. I'm so sorry. Okay, I'm gonna try this again. Okay, it's working again. Yay. I hope everyone can see this. If not, please let me know. Okay, so snakes are ancient symbols of both healing and transformation in many cultures, and in others they symbolize fertility and eternity even. Of course, doctors who treat us are always wearing a lapel pin that has at least one snake on it. So it's definitely a very ancient accepted symbol in the medical field. The Hopi Indians used to believe that snakes were responsible for the success of their crops, and they would pay tribute to them with an annual snake dance in which they purified the snakes and then would dance with them in their mouths. And many cultures around the world very much celebrate the snake. Here's in India, a man charming a cobra. And there's this enormous Buddha snake statue in Thailand. There are many ancient beliefs about snakes, and some ancient cultures worship snakes and believed them to be the umbilical cords that tethered humanity to Earth. However, a lot of people fear snakes. A lot of people do, including my own mom. She was one of these people that was terrified of snakes, absolutely terrified of them. She would have nightmares about them almost every night. She just thought they were so slimy and creepy and gross, and she couldn't believe that I would ever like a snake. So she actually let me buy a snake, and she eventually touched it and found out that it wasn't slimy at all, that they're just kind of cool and smooth and not slimy. And she kind of began to change her mind once she got to know a snake. But it was a complicated road getting to that point. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what happened with my first snake. Basically, the snake that I bought was a ribbon snake, and ribbon snakes give live birth. And they are native. My parents would not let me have a non-native snake because they figured if I ever got bored with the snake, and we would probably eventually want to release the snake into the wild, it's really a good idea to buy a native snake for a child, because snakes also escape. So if they escape into the wild and they're native, then that's really fine, you know? They can survive and they're not going to alter the ecology. So the snake that I happened to buy when I was about 9 years old, 10 years old, somewhere around there, happened to be pregnant. Heavily pregnant, and ribbon snakes give live birth. So we woke up the next day and the entire aquarium tank was filled with writhing black snakes. And of course, to my mom's absolute abject horror, one snake became 26 snakes overnight. So anyway, so instead of fearing snakes, let's think about another animal that we probably really should fear, and that is rats. If we're going to fear anything, rats are probably a good thing to fear, because look at the list of diseases, according to the CDC, that rats can transmit. Anything from hantavirus, hemorrhagic fever, leptospirosis, trichinosis, bacterial food poisoning, the bubonic plague, salmonellosis, arenaviruses, tularemia, hemorrhagic fever, murine typhus. I mean, it's a horrible list of diseases. And rats actually seek out humans because, unlike snakes, rats want to live among us. They kind of depend on us for their survival. They want to get into our houses. Rats can squeeze into a half-inch crack. They can chew on wires in your attic, causing fires and electrical issues. Rats commonly bite children in their sleep because of food crumbs left on their clothing when they go to bed. Rats contaminate 10 times the amount of food that they eat with their urine, droppings, and hair. And you can catch diseases from rats just from the fleas that they carry. So are you convinced that you've been fearing the wrong animal? The good news is that snakes eat rats. Snakes eat lots and lots of rats. So the non-venomous native snakes are very, very beneficial. They will eat those rats, they'll eat those mice, and they also help keep populations of non-native invasive other animals like Cuban tree frogs and and the Cuban brown anoles in check as well. So they should be left alone and respected, and they should just be allowed to do their job. They really do help us out a lot with rodents. I'm going to start with a couple of legless lizards. Believe it or not, these are actually lizards that have 0 legs. The slender glass lizard, and there's the island glass lizard. We actually have 4 different species of legless lizards in Florida. And they're called glass lizards because they break very, very easily, unfortunately for them. And if you're ever possibly digging in your yard, you may end up with a poor little slender glass lizard that has been cut in half with your shovel. You didn't see him, and his tail will be flapping over here, and he'll be darting off over here. So they have 0 legs, and the one on the right is the Florida worm lizard, which, believe it or not, that is an actual lizard. It looks just like a yucky pink worm. And we have a couple of other snake-like creatures that have barely visible limbs or vestigial limbs. One of them is the Amphiuma, which is sort of like the stuff of nightmares. If you look at its little face with all those teeth. He's a large salamander type creature, very, very common in Florida. And if you see the picture of the people holding him, you get an idea of how large he is too. And the Florida sand skink, which is a threatened species, and he just has those little teeny weeny vestigial limbs that you can barely see. But they look very much like snakes upon first glance. There are 46 species of native snakes who live in Florida, and only 6 of those are venomous. Compare that to Australia. They have 33 species of venomous snakes in Australia. So we're very fortunate that we only have 6 in our whole state that are venomous. And out of these 6, only 4 of them actually live anywhere near us. The other 2 are way up in North Florida and the Panhandle. So unless you go traveling up there, you are never going to see the other 2. There are 4 non-native snakes that are in Florida, and 3 are now established in Florida. And of course, our main problem snake there is the Burmese python, which is especially prevalent in the Everglades. Its populations are just burgeoning, and it is doing a lot of severe damage down there to, especially for the mammal populations. It is estimated that tens of thousands of them are breeding in the Everglades. They can get up to 23 feet long and close to 150 pounds. They can eat anything from deer to raccoons to alligators even. And they are responsible, scientists think, for 90% reduction in the mammalian species in the Everglades. So really serious ecological damage is being done. This one in this picture ate a deer, and a 17-foot long female was caught in the Everglades with 95 eggs inside of her. And this is not uncommon. That's why they're getting so out of control, is because they are able to produce that many eggs. It is just a huge amount of eggs. And here's what they look like stretched out across the road. I mean, they are just absolutely massive when they get large. If you happen to see an exotic species, please call this number. It's 1-800-I've-GOT-1. There's also a very handy mobile app, I've Got One, and it has your GPS coordinates, and they can easily track where you are when you saw this animal by your GPS coordinates. So it's a really handy app that helps out wildlife officials tremendously. All right, venom versus poison. We actually say venomous snakes, not poisonous snakes. And that is because poison, you ingest poison. Venom gets injected into you by a venomous animal. So the difference there is in the delivery method of the venom versus the poison. Animals are always referred to as venomous or non-venomous, whereas plants are called poisonous. Did you know that snakes never blink? Snakes do not have eyelids. Instead, they have that clear protective covering over their eyes called brils, which are modified scales, and they are shed along with their skin when they shed their skin. So when snakes want to go to sleep, they can close their retinas, but not their eyeballs. So sleeping snakes always look like they're awake. And when they start to get a clouded eye brill, that means that it's time to shed their skin. You may have seen some snakes occasionally that have the clouded eyes, and that's because they're getting ready to shed. They have to shed their skin periodically because while their bodies grow larger, their skin does not grow larger. So this can happen 4 to 12 times per year, depending on the species. And snake scales are made of keratin, which is the same thing that human hair is made out of. Each scale is as sensitive as a human fingertip. And shedding can help to remove harmful parasites and may take a couple of days up to a couple of weeks to complete. And skin shedding in snakes is called ecdysis. Snakes also have very poor eyesight, which is exacerbated when their burrows are clouded up like that. And they can actually go blind if their burrows are not shed successfully. Snakes also do not have external ears. They do not have eardrums either. They do have fully formed inner ear structures, though, within their heads. And this inner ear structure is connected directly to their jawbone. So through this, they can feel vibrations through the ground, which relays a signal to the brain via that inner ear structure, and it registers as hearing something. Snakes have very flexible jaws. It is a misconception that snakes can unhinge their jaws completely. They don't. They do have to swallow all of their food whole, but they do not have the fused bottom mandibles like humans and other mammals have, but they're connected by an elasticated ligament. So this does allow them to eat prey that is far larger than their heads. But occasionally they'll get a little too greedy and they'll eat something far too large, or sometimes they'll eat something that will fight its way to get out of the snake and end up killing the snake. And just because a snake happens to bite you does not mean that that's a venomous snake. Any snake will bite you if provoked, or if you just happen to accidentally get too close to them. Harmless water snakes, if you don't see that they're there and you're reaching into a pond, this has happened to me before where I've been bitten multiple times by a harmless water snake, which can be a little aggressive, that type of snake, and they will just keep on biting you if you don't get out of their way. And they will definitely draw blood too. But if, and even picking up a harmless black racer snake will probably result in it trying to bite you. They will definitely draw blood. They have very fine, kind of sandpaperish feeling teeth, or it kind of feels like getting hit with a spiny bromeliad, basically. And you know how bromeliads can draw blood too. It's that sort of a wound. But if a harmless snake bites you, just wash the area really well with soap and water and you should be fine. Harmless snakes will also hiss at you, and they may coil up. They may act like they're going to strike at you. All of that is just to warn you to back away. Snakes really just want to be left alone. If you do see a snake, appreciate it from a distance, but please give it the space that it really wants, and just steer clear. We're going to start talking about the non-venomous snakes in our area. This is a teensy tiny little actual snake, believe it or not. A lot of people mistake this snake for a worm, and it is an actual true snake, and you can see its size there relative to fingers and pennies. teeny tiny. It is the Brahminy blind snake, and it is actually blind, and it is a true non-venomous, it's a non-native snake. It's an exotic that has naturalized here. Although this particular one is not really considered a problem species. They are all female, and they can reproduce without a mate, which is very interesting. This is called parthenogenesis. They are the most widespread snake in all the world. Sometimes they're called the flower pot snake. They do eat ants and termites, so they do a good job there. They are not segmented like earthworms, and if you were to pick one up, they will stick out their tongues when you hold them. So that's how you know for sure that it's a Brahminy blind snake and not a worm. Here is a very common snake that we have in our area, the southern black racer. These guys are diurnal, which means that they are active during the day, which is one reason why they're so frequently seen. This is probably the most frequently seen snake in all of our area. And they have a juvenile form that is much different looking than the adult, and that is pretty common in snakes. So I've tried to include the juveniles here in this presentation as much as possible, just so you can get an idea of what the juvenile looks like as opposed to the adult. Because sometimes people see this little guy and they think, oh my gosh, he's so patterned. You know, what is that? Is that a baby rattlesnake or what is he? But nope, that is a juvenile black racer. That is what they look like until they get older and they start to turn black and they start to look like this. Another very common snake that we have in our area is the eastern corn snake, also called the red rat snake. And these guys, oh, I should have mentioned too that the black racer is also an egg layer. We'll flip back to that real quick. Black racer also lays eggs, and they look kind of similar to the corn snake eggs, kind of elongated, narrow white eggs. And you can see that in that picture there on the left. Obviously, they get the name red rat snake because they eat a lot of rats. And the corn snake as well kind of came from the fact that during corn production, people used to kind of clean corn. Farmers would clean corn in corn cribs, and these corn cribs would get absolutely infested with rats. And of course, the lovely little corn / red rat snakes would come along and help the farmers take care of that horrible rat problem. So that's where they get those two common names. And the juvenile form is very different looking. And oftentimes you'll see them quite large as still in the juvenile pattern. And that throws people off a lot. And they're wondering, what on earth is this big snake? I've never seen this before. And it looks very different from anything else I've ever seen before. It doesn't look like a red rat snake or a typical corn snake. But that is just the juvenile form, even though they can be still pretty large. And unfortunately here, a local resident killed this one and sent me the picture, unfortunately, after the fact. I don't like to get those types of emails because it's like, okay, I'm happy to identify a snake for you, but it's very sad when I'm identifying one that's had its head severed. So it's much better if you'd like to send me ID pictures to try to do that safely from a distance, take pictures, but try not to kill the snakes first or at all, really. We'll talk about that later. Okay, eastern yellow rat snakes. These guys are really known by the long vertical striping that they have on their bodies as adults. That's really what clues you in immediately that, yes, that is an eastern yellow rat snake. They can be anywhere from a very yellowish, golden yellow, almost orangish, to almost a khaki-ish color as well, with some gold in there. And here's what they look like. Here is a newborn And here's what they look like as a juvenile. So you can see that their pattern really changes radically as well as they grow and get older. Also very, very common. Someone spotted one of these very recently in Robinson Preserve and sent us a picture from a distance of a live snake, which is great. We love those. Okay, here is the gray rat snake. This one you probably won't see as much, and I think the main reason for that is just his coloration. He blends in really well with things, so you're not going to see him as much. All of these rat snakes are egg layers. This guy lays between 5 and 27 eggs, and the juvenile form is down here. So definitely the markings are much more striking when they're juveniles, and they start to fade and become a little more muted as they get older. Here is one of the most beautiful snakes that we have in Florida, the rough green snake. These guys are very arboreal snakes, so you'll mostly see them climbing up trees. The rat snakes as well are good climbers. They have keeled scales on their bellies, which the rough green snake gets its name from, the rough green snake. And the keeled scales are kind of bending outward scales a little bit, and they catch onto trees and posts and things like that. So you'll often see all the rat snakes and the rough green snake as well climbing up things. Because they have that ability with those keeled belly scales. This guy only lays about 3 to 10 eggs. So unfortunately, that does not bode well for its survival necessarily. Let's see. Oops. Oops. Sorry. Okay, we're gonna, oops. Oh no, uh-oh. There we go, okay. Okay, ribbon snake. This is the one that my mom finally broke down and allowed me to buy. It is a very slender snake, that's where it gets its name. And they are live bearers, so they don't lay eggs. This is one of the snakes that gives live birth to lots of little babies, up to 27. The one that I brought home was pregnant with 25. And so they can really freak out a mother. That's for sure. And the next picture is kind of an example of what my aquarium looked like the next day, to the horror of my mother. All right, garter snakes. We have 2 different species in Florida, the eastern garter snake and the blue stripe garter. And the blue stripe garter is only found in Florida. Because of its great beauty, this poor guy is often subject to poaching. And well, like unfortunately, a lot of our Florida wildlife is subject to poaching and sale to people in foreign countries, because we have a lot of very interesting wildlife. And there's the juvenile form down here of the eastern garter snake, and the juvenile form of the blue stripe garter snake. They also give live birth up to 20 babies. And I'm sure probably almost everyone in the audience has encountered one of these cute, very petite little snakes. They're very common as well. The ringneck snake. They have the orange ring around its neck, which clues you in immediately as to what it is, and really pretty orange markings on the belly. And it lays eggs, only about 2 to 8 eggs. And the juveniles look very similar to the adults in both cases. This is the pine wood snake, which also lays small clutches of eggs and is also a very petite little snake. Both of them are quite small. sorry. This is the coach whip snake. And this one, it often fools people because typically with its coloration, the front of it can look exactly like a black racer. It's predominantly black sometimes in the front, and then the back of it, it has this kind of more tan color. So it's quite unusual that way. They are very slender, very quick, and rarely spotted. And as I said, they're often thought to be a black racer when you just can't really see the rest of their body. You might assume that you've seen a black racer. And that's the juvenile form of the coach whip. And they get the name coach whip, of course, because they are so long and slender. They resemble an old-time coach whip. Here is the eastern mud snake, also called the red-bellied mud snake. And these guys lay eggs in huge clutches of eggs. They can be up to about 100 eggs in a clutch. And they're actually very docile snakes. They really are not inclined to bite, even if you were to pick one up necessarily. They're very gentle, docile snakes, and their favorite food is the Amphiuma. So they help to keep those populations under control. And here's the juvenile. You can see that their belly gets much more red when it gets older. This snake is the one that probably has the hoop snake, if you've ever heard of the dreaded hoop snake, which is really just a myth of the snake that will put its tail in its mouth and roll downhill in order to kind of thrust itself at you javelin style, tail first, because the myth was that the tail was poisonous. Or venomous. In this case, none of that is true. And we think possibly that that myth originated with this snake because this snake, instead of trying to bite you, will just kind of poke its tail at you, but its tail is completely harmless as well. Here is the Florida pine snake. And this one is another small egg layer, small clutches of eggs. This is a species of special concern due to habitat loss. Unfortunately, development is causing some loss of habitat with these guys. They use the dens of native pocket gophers and gopher tortoises, and that is habitat that's being lost rapidly, a lot of pine uplands and scrub habitat. Here's the eastern hognose snake. These guys have a habit of flattening out their head, as you can see in that picture, kind of like an old leather slipper is what they feel like when they're flattened out like that, which is unfortunate because oftentimes people will see that and think that, oh my gosh, that snake has a really big wide head, it must be venomous. So these guys end up losing their lives sometimes just because they're trying to project that they're this big, dangerous, venomous snake when they're not. They get their name, the eastern hognose, because they do have a really upturned little snout, and that is the biggest clue as to what species you're looking at here with these guys. Both of these forms are very common. You can see the pure black ones and also the extremely patterned ones. There's also more of a dark gray that almost looks black. It's so dark. The belly color on them is also extremely variable. It can be anywhere from pink to green. Here is the Florida king snake, and they're kind of famous for being one of the snakes that is immune to the venom of rattlesnakes. So the eastern diamondback rattlesnake is their prey. They will definitely eat venomous snakes. and it is an egg-laying constrictor. It lives in South and Central Florida, usually near the water. And unfortunately, populations are thought to be diminishing of this snake. Again, it's losing a lot of habitat. It can lay anywhere from 3 to 30 eggs, and as it gets older, its scale color tends to lighten. It's quite dark. Here's the picture on the left of the juvenile. And as it ages, it becomes much lighter. Here are a couple of snakes that are very, very frequently misidentified and killed because people think that they're dealing with a venomous coral snake, and that is not the case. So we're going to go into a deep dive on how to tell the difference here. The scarlet snake, it has bands that are gray or white that run in between these red and black bands. And it is another egg layer, 3 to 8 eggs. Keep in mind that red touch yellow is the old rhyme that tells you whether you're dealing with a coral snake or not. So if red touches yellow, if you look at this, you see that no, red is not touching yellow. Red is touching black. In both of these cases, it's red touching black. So that tells you immediately that this is not a coral snake. And the scarlet king snake, it can have bands here that are either cream or yellow. The ones that are yellow are the ones that are very often mistaken for coral snakes. And that one lays 2 to 9 eggs. Now, notice on these guys that both of them have red noses. And that is another dead giveaway that these are not venomous coral snakes, because the venomous coral snakes here, they all have black noses. So that's another thing to look for. And also see that red touching yellow. When red touches yellow and you have a black nose, that's when you know you have a coral snake. And get away from that thing. Okay, here's another non-venomous snake that is very often mistaken for a venomous one. And really, it's just because the thing is so large. When they're adults, they get very, very, very large. And that immediately makes people think, oh my gosh, what is this thing? It must be dangerous because it's so huge. But no, this is a gentle giant. This is another snake that is able to eat venomous snakes. So he does his part there. Unfortunately, it is now very rare. It's a federally endangered species because unfortunately, so many people do end up killing them needlessly. They're called the Eastern indigo snake because they have this gorgeous, almost blue-black, very glossy appearance. They are the largest snake that we have, 8.5 feet long maximum, and very, very thick bodies for a non-venomous snake. Sometimes they can have some bronze coloring, particularly up near their heads. And they're just absolutely beautiful snakes. And it's a shame that their populations have diminished so severely. Just really out of panic, unfortunately. And another snake that is often mistaken as a water moccasin, a venomous cottonmouth water moccasin, are the native Florida water snakes. We have several different species of Florida water snakes, and this is the green. Again, people panic. They see this kind of thick-bodied snake near the water, and they think automatically, oh my gosh, it is a venomous cottonmouth moccasin. Let's kill it. No, not a good idea. You need to look for clues, and really it's not a good idea to kill venomous snakes either. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. almost all of the large adults in this species, they're over 3.5 feet in length. Almost all of them are females. And when they're gravid, when they're pregnant, the females can become really quite large and thick. And that's another reason why they're mistaken for the cottonmouth moccasins. They give live birth, and litters are usually around 20 to 30, but can be up to as many as 100 juveniles. And here's a picture of what the juvenile Florida green snake looks like. And here's the Florida brown water snake, another live bearing species, up to 60 young. And it definitely gets its name because it is quite a brown colored snake. And here's probably the most common of the water snakes that you'll see is the southern banded water snake. And they get rather large. They can be anywhere from 24 to 60 inches. And you can see by the coloration here, it's very, very similar to an adult cottonmouth water moccasin. So unfortunately, a lot of people assume that's what it is, and they are too hasty, and they end up murdering these guys. One characteristic that absolutely tells these guys apart is that they have, see that whiskering that comes down where pointing with the cursor? They all have that whiskering that comes down off of their lower jaw. And that tells you right away that is not a moccasin. This is a water snake. They also have round pupils. And the cottonmouth moccasin does not have a round pupil. It has an elliptical pupil, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The juveniles are commonly mistaken for copperheads, and we don't even have copperheads in our area at all. Those are only up in North Florida. So people panic again. They think, oh my gosh, it's a copperhead. So these guys kind of get it on both ends. When they're juveniles, people think they're copperheads and want to kill them. And when they're older, they think that they're cottonmouth water moccasins and want to kill them. But they are perfectly beneficial, native, non-venomous snakes. And here are a couple of examples of non-venomous snakes trying to mimic the venomous ones. And another reason why the harmless banded water snake that we just looked at is mistaken commonly is that in order to try to look more threatening, he kind of mashes down his body to make his body look thicker and larger. And he does the same thing with his head. So he makes his head actually look more broad and triangular, unfortunately, which also makes him look more like a venomous cottonmouth moccasin. That is what he thinks is going to try to keep you away from him, which definitely is a good thing. It should, but that also is the cue for some people to want to chop his head off. All right, the harmless eastern hognose is another one that does the same thing. It tries to mash its head down so that it makes its head look more triangular, therefore more like a venomous snake. So those are the two that like to do that to try to fool us. You can definitely tell by their round pupils, though, that they are not venomous snakes, despite what they're trying to tell you. And here's what I was talking about. The non-venomous snake has that very clear round pupil. The venomous snake has that almost cat-like vertical or elliptical pupil. And here's the heads next to each other of the non-venomous banded water snake. Again, look at that whiskering. You can see that whiskering very clearly, which is a really big clue that that is a water snake and it's harmless. You can kind of see the round pupil here, and you can see that the venomous snake, and when we're talking about pit vipers in Florida, which 3 of our 4 venomous snakes are pit vipers here, have that really triangular head and a very much smaller defined neck, whereas the non-venomous snakes really do not have a defined neck like that. And we'll look at, excuse me, snake head anatomy here. The pit vipers have two very large hollow fangs through which the venom is delivered, and they do not release all of the venom in the first bite, so multiple bites can occur, thereby increasing the venom load. And even a dead, severed snake head can inject venom for up to 90 minutes after it's dead and severed, just due to reflexes. So that's something to watch out for around a dead snake. The other snakes, including the venomous coral snakes, have smaller hooked teeth that are more like the bromeliad spines, like I was mentioning before. Coral snakes do not necessarily have to chew on you. That is kind of a myth, that a coral snake has to chew on your skin in order to deliver venom into you. It can be delivered into you in just one coral snake bite. However, the longer it is allowed to chew on you, the more venom you will receive from a coral snake. Okay, so again, here is a non-venomous hognose, and he's threatened, so he has mashed his neck down to make his head look larger, to make himself appear like he is a venomous snake, and he's really not. And here are the differences between a water snake, a non-venomous water snake. They have a very round snout. They have a very round pupil. The head is triangular, but it's nowhere near as broad as it is with the venomous pit vipers. The venomous cottonmouth has more of a pointy snout. All of the pit vipers have this heat sensing pit, which is where the name pit viper comes from. They all have that heat sensing pit because, remember, they don't have very good hearing, they don't have very good eyesight, and in this case, this heat sensing pit allows them to sense warm-blooded mammals that are their prey nearby. And of course, that very menacing looking elliptical pupil is a characteristic that all of them have. The exception to the venomous snake elliptical pupil is the coral snake. It is not a pit viper, so it does not have that very large triangular head that pit vipers have. It does not have the heat sensing pit. It does not have the elliptical eye. It is actually a colubrid, which is related to the cobra, believe it or not, even though they do not have the ability to fan out their neck the way that the cobra does. Just remember, the most important things with identifying the coral snake is the red touching yellow. However you want to remember that in a rhyme, red touch yellow, kill a fellow, that's the popular one. That is really your main cue here, that this is a venomous coral snake and not one of the harmless lookalikes. Also, the black nose. They do have that little black nose always. And they do actually have round pupils, just like a non-venomous snake. Okay, so here are some of Florida's venomous snakes. Now you see that I have the line through the southern copperhead, and that was because he is really found only up in the panhandle. So unless you're taking a vacation up to the panhandle and you're going to be hiking around in the woods in the panhandle, you're not going to run into this guy at all. They do not live here. The cottonmouth water moccasin does live here. The eastern coral snake does live here. The eastern diamondback rattlesnake lives here. and the pygmy rattlesnake lives here, sometimes called the dusky pygmy. The timber rattlesnake does not live in this area at all. He is only in northern Florida. So only if you're traveling to northern Florida will you have to worry about running into this guy. So it's really just these four that we have in our area: the cottonmouth, the coral snake, the eastern diamondback rattler, and the pygmy rattlesnake. So that's not bad, right? We don't have very many to worry about at all. Okay, red touch yellow, kill a fellow, red touch black, friend of Jack. This is our venomous coral snake. I'm sorry if it seems like I'm just repeating, but it's important to remember these things, and sometimes repetition helps us to remember. Again, the eyes of the venomous snake, the pit vipers, are going to have that vertical pupil. They're going to have the heat sensing pit, and they're going to have the nostril. Three out of our four venomous snakes are the pit vipers, and they all have the heat sensing pit. Pit vipers do not lay eggs. Pit vipers all give live birth. And you can see the pits on all of these guys, the cottonmouth water moccasin. One thing about them, they all look kind of angry, don't they? They always look kind of angry. The eastern diamondback rattlesnake has the pit here, and the dusky pygmy rattlesnake has the pit there. Okay, the Florida cottonmouth water moccasin, as an adult, it has this very thick body, as you can see. It gets very dark with age. So as a juvenile, again, this is one of those that is often mistaken for copperhead, even though we don't have copperheads here. People assume that we do, and they think it's a copperhead, but the juvenile form is much, much different looking than the adult. And the juveniles, when they're very young, have this very distinctive bright yellow tip at the end of their tail, and they actually wiggle that tip to attract prey. So that's part of their survival mechanism. They'll kind of hide behind something and wiggle that tail, and they can jump on their prey and eat it. They are that really pale brown when they are juveniles, with a coppery color and darker bands. And of course, what gives them the name cottonmouth is when they open up their mouths, it's very white inside, both the adult and the juvenile. And they can get up to 48 inches long, so pretty good sized snake when they're mature. And here's another example of looking at a couple of these pit vipers from above. They have these really noticeable fat cheeks from above with a narrow neck. So that is a definite clue that this is a venomous pit viper. The moccasin is on the left, a young moccasin that still has the copper color, and a eastern diamondback rattlesnake on the right. Now, here is a young moccasin that was killed needlessly. The thing about killing venomous snakes is that killing them really greatly increases a person's chance of being bitten by that snake. And nobody wants that. It's really always best to leave them alone. They all play an important role in the ecosystem. They make up a significant proportion of the middle order predators that keep our natural ecosystems working. And without them, the number of prey species would increase to unnatural levels, and the predators that eat snakes would then struggle to find food. So it's very important to just leave them alone and get out of their way. If you're really, really concerned about a snake, definitely I would recommend that you call a professional to come in and remove that snake for you. It's not something that you want to try to do on your own. And they would be able to remove it, hopefully without having to dispatch the snake. One thing that a lot of people don't realize is that our native opossum is known to consume at least 12 species of snakes, including venomous ones, believe it or not. So these guys are actually kind of cool. This is a picture of a cute little opossum eating a venomous copperhead in a North Florida garage. They also consume ticks, fire ants, and they have a very low occurrence of rabies, so they are a cool animal to have around. And other mammals that consume venomous snakes are raccoons, otters, foxes, bobcats, coyotes, and black bears. Here is the eastern diamondback rattlesnake. Again, pit viper, so it has live young, and it produces 6 to 21 live young at a time. And these guys can get quite large, up to 6 feet long, and they can strike a distance of up to 2/3 of their body length. So you have to be very careful. They primarily live in pine flatwoods and sand pine scrub habitat. And if you know anything about Manatee County, that is the, the predominant ecosystem of Manatee County is pine flatwoods. So these guys are very common in areas where there are now houses, unfortunately. So it is, I would say, kind of common to run into these guys, depending on how new your community might be. You know, they were there when the houses went in, and you may see them still occasionally. Every time that they shed, their skin shedding adds 1 segment to their rattle. So you can kind of tell their age somewhat by how many of those segments they have, but it's not always reliable because, of course, they can get broken off. But here is an actual rattlesnake rattle that one of our master gardeners gifted me with, that she found in her yard. And it's, of course, made of keratin, like the rest of the skin is that they shed. And it is merely the segments, how they interact with each other as you wag it, that makes that noise. It isn't actually filled with anything like a maraca that sometimes people think that they're like little maracas, but no, it's just the segments connecting with each other that make that noise. Okay, another rattlesnake that we have is a little guy, and he only gets to be about 1 foot to 2 feet long. So they're quite small. It's the dusky pygmy rattlesnake. And again, live young, only between 5 and 8 live babies are had. And like the cottonmouth water moccasin, this one also as a juvenile has that yellow tip to its tail, as you can see in this picture of the juvenile here. And he is very rarely seen. They tend to be really wary of people, I would say. And again, like all of these snakes, they really do not want to have a human encounter. They just want to be left alone. Sometimes people will pick these up because they're so small. They think that they're going to be less harmful than the eastern diamondback, and you know, they want to play with it, and if they get bitten by it, they think, oh, it'll be fine because it's so small. Well, no, they can be, you know, it's a severe bite that these guys can give too, and their venom also packs a wallop. So you really have to respect them and keep away from them. most of the cases of snake bites involve harassment of snakes. So out of the more than 330 million people who live in the US, only about 5 people per year die of snake bites. The vast majority of those who are bitten are young men aged 16 to 25, and the vast majority have alcohol intoxication involved. So just be careful, leave them alone, get out of the way. To prevent snake bites, avoid areas where snakes may be hiding, such as under rocks and logs. If you have to move a rock or a log, kind of maybe assume that there might be a snake under. So just keep that in the back of your mind whenever you're working in your yard. You might run into a snake here or there. So if you have that in the back of your mind, you're going to be more cautious, and you're going to be a lot less likely to have a negative encounter with a snake. So even though most snakes are not venomous, you want to avoid picking up and playing with any snake unless you have been properly trained. Never ever provoke a snake. That is when many of the serious snake bites occur. Tap ahead of you if you're walking or hiking in the woods. Tap ahead of you with a walking stick before entering an area where you can't see your feet particularly. Snakes will try to avoid you if given enough warning. And when you're hiking in an area known to have snakes, or that you suspect probably will have snakes, wear long pants and boots if possible. Between 7,000 and 8,000 people are bitten by venomous snakes each year, but as I said, only about 5 of those die from the bite. So both pit viper and coral snakes can be effectively treated with antivenom, but the time between the bite and the medical care is critical. So if you are bitten, you want to seek a medical treatment immediately. You want to immobilize the bitten area and keep it lower than your heart. If medical care is more than 30 minutes away, it's recommended that you wrap a bandage 2 to 4 inches above the bite, but loose enough to slip a finger under it. You don't want it tight. They don't recommend that you tourniquet with a snake bite. So also, you do not want to try to pick up the snake that has bitten you or to try to trap it. If possible, try to make note of the color and the size and the shape of the snake. It would be very helpful for the doctor to be able to treat you properly if you can provide a description of the snake. Do not wait for symptoms to appear if bitten. Seek immediate medical attention. Do not allow the person that's been bitten to become overexerted, and if necessary, carry that person to safety. Do not apply a tourniquet. Do not apply a cold compress to a snake bite. Do not apply ice or soak the wound in water. Do not cut into a snake bite with a knife or a razor. Do not try to suck the venom out with your mouth. Do not give the person stimulants or pain medicine unless a doctor tells you to. Do not give the person anything by mouth. And do not raise the site of the bite above the person's heart by all means. Okay, now who couldn't love this little face? This is the juvenile black racer again. I challenge you to to tell me that snake is not cute. Well, I thank you very much for attending the presentation today. If you have any questions, probably Alyssa has been answering some questions along the way, but let me see if I can see any here. I am always happy to ID snakes if you send me pictures. So please take note of my email address, and Send me pictures. Of course, be safe always, and your distance with snakes, just in case it's something venomous. Just be safe with it. I'm gonna go up here and look at the chat and see. Okay, this webinar was recorded, I believe. I hope I did it right. I always question my Zoom skills here, so I'm hoping that it was recorded. And if you would like, just to be safe, if you would like a copy of it, and just in case I didn't record it, please put your email address in the chat, and I will definitely send you a PDF of it. Okay, so please go ahead and do that if you would like to have a copy of it, just to be safe, because like I say, I really am not sure. I thought I hit record, but I'm not sure that I did. All right, well, thank you all for attending today. I'm looking through questions or through chat, and yes, and from Richard, a parting thought is, please just don't kill any snakes. All snakes are important. They're an important part of the ecosystem. It's just walk away from them, walk away from them. Don't kill them. All right. Well, thank you all very much. And I'm seeing that a lot of you are putting in your email addresses. So thank you. And I will get you that after the fact. Oh, okay. And Dorinda says the red dot is blinking, so I probably am recording. Okay, good. All right. Well, thank you all. Appreciate you, and have a wonderful day, and take care out there.
Do you know there's an air purifier in there?
I don't.
Like right, I just noticed that.